At Morris Back, we're not just about building a better back. We're striving to build a better community. Because our future and the future of Dublin, its families, and the businesses we serve are all tied together. Morris Back. It pays to go blue.
Hi everyone, we'd like to welcome you to Real Talk. I'm your host, Pat Terrio. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we here at TV35 really like to bring awareness about some very important issues. And we've got the Executive Director of WINGS with us here, Miss Heather Mullis. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Nice to see you again.
You too.
This is a very special month for your organization, isn't it, Heather?
It is.
And the backdrop we're here at the Lawrence County Library, and it's such an amazing backdrop. We're going to talk to you a little bit about WINGS, and we want to talk to you about just some of the things that you have going on.
Okay. Well, as the display that we're in front of is our annual shoe display, and it is a representation of all the men, women, and children who have died in the past year because of domestic violence. And this year, I think there's 70 names on the list. One from Lawrence County, ranging from little bitty babies to senior citizens.
It's so profound if you were able to actually just look at this, to see the shoes and to see the names and to really think about why they're up there. Tell the people a little bit about WINGS and what you offer here.
Well, WINGS is a domestic violence intervention program here in Lawrence County, and our mission is to support families in their efforts to live violence-free. And that means that we offer safety, we offer support, and we do offer shelter. So that victims of domestic violence, if they are looking for a way out, then we do whatever we need to do to get them out, get them safe, and get them on the road to independent living.
And you talk about a way out. There's so many people, Heather, that are in abusive relationships and don't even realize that.
Absolutely.
Can we expound upon that just a little bit?
Well, I think that most people think that just because there's no broken bones or black eyes that it's not abuse, when actually the psychological, the mental and emotional abuse is much more damaging and longer lasting than the physical scars.
It is, and that's what we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing the scars. And if we don't see the scars, we don't take it really, it's kind of taken lightly.
Absolutely. But you can heal from a broken bone, but if you've been told over and over, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're a bad mother, you can't do anything right, it takes a long time to get over that, if ever. It
really does. And, and that's even in relationships where I've been at schools and just seeing the interaction between girls and boys or people in relationships of how they respond to one another. And just, so it's not there's no age limit on that.
Oh, no. And we're seeing a lot of teenagers and even young teenagers who are involved in dating relationships that are already experiencing violence at that age.
And let's talk a little bit about the power and control wheel.
Okay, well, domestic violence in itself is really an issue of power control. It's not about losing your temper and not or getting drunk and not being able to control yourself.
Right.
It is about exercising power over another person, and that may be financial power, that may be physical power, that may be isolating them from their friends and family, and all the different ways that you can control somebody. And
when I think about I have a vivid memory about my own family and about my life, and I want to share a little something personal with y'all. I was 4 years old. My mother's younger sister was in domestic violence, and she was actually killed by her husband with the kids in the car. And I was very young. And even the children were very young. I spoke with some of her kids just this morning, and they were 6 and 7 and 9 years old, and they actually witnessed their father unloading a .38 special right there into their mom. And as adults, I asked them how, just want to know how it affected them, because I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what domestic violence was at my age at 4.
No.
But there are families every day with kids
That are witnessing it.
that are
Growing
witnessing
up
it
in yes.
and not understanding it.
No, well, and if you've lived it all your life, however short your life that is, you think that's normal.
Yeah.
And you don't know that all families don't function that way. And that's one of the things that we try to do when we're working with the families is we really work with the kids. And we talk to them about what's a healthy relationship and how a healthy family functions.
And I used to work at a domestic violence shelter. And just some of the things that I witnessed there when I saw families coming in.
Yes.
Little bitty kids. And when they would see their mom just so battered and so bruised, and some had broken bones, arms. And it was hard for me to witness because I was a young mother. And I think that stood with me, that has stuck with me through the years, because that part of me, when you're talking about domestic violence, I just, I feel heat rushing from my toes up to the top of my head when I even think about someone being in a domestic violence situation, just as being a person,
I think that those of us definitely looking in from the outside feel so much anger that somebody could do that to another person, especially somebody that they claim to love.
Right. Love shouldn't hurt, though, right?
No, absolutely not.
Love shouldn't hurt. And so if someone was wanting to get in touch with you, or to try to get some services from you, what do they need to do?
Well, they would just need to give us a call. We have somebody answering our phone, our crisis line, 24 hours a day. It's locally it's 272-8000. So it's real easy to remember. And like I said, whether you're a victim yourself, whether you're a friend, whether you're a family member, whether you're just a concerned neighbor, give us a call. We'll talk to you about the situation and see what we can do to help.
Absolutely. It's always pleasant to talk to you, Heather.
Well, thank you.
And we're proud of the work that you all are doing. And look forward to talking with Charlotte in a little
Yes.
bit. She's going to talk to us about some of the community outreach things that you all are involved in. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Heather Mullis, everyone. We're back, everyone, talking about domestic violence. We've got Ms. Charlotte Kelly, who is the community educator from Wings, with us. How are you, Charlotte?
I'm doing good, and you?
Doing very well. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about the work that you do specifically in community education.
Well, I'm the community educator, so I basically talk to anyone that'll listen, and I cover a variety of topics, whether it be just an overall about our agency, a lot of prevention education. I go into the school systems and teach a healthy relationships curriculum for 7 counties. Wings covers 7 counties, so we're in lots of different school systems, and we do a lot of outreach, such as the display behind us, in churches and community groups.
Now, what made you decide to get into this line of social service work, Charlotte?
Well, there's a lot of different opportunities in social services, but I think it's really important to do a prevention side, because you can help all you want, but if you're not changing the culture, then it's never going to end. And so having the opportunity as a prevention educator to go into the schools and work with the youth hands-on is really something that I enjoy.
That's fantastic. And you work 7 counties.
Yes.
So you're quite the busy young lady.
Yes, I stay on the road a lot.
On the road. All right. Now, let's give us some examples about some of this stuff, because when you're talking about 7 counties, that's a whole bunch of schools. Are there certain age limits? Is it merely high school? Do you do, middle schools, elementary? What do you?
We work mostly, most of my in-school presentations are with middle school and high schoolers. 6th through 12th grade is the concentration, mainly because they're in relationships. And so to teach them...
What grade?
6th through 12th grade.
Okay.
Yes, and it's happening. It's unbelievable, but you would not believe some of
Right.
the stories that I hear, and the students, every time I'm in their classroom, they're bringing notes to me and saying, well, this happened to my friend, or this is happening, and they have no idea what to do. And, we talk a lot about teen dating violence, and as you were saying earlier, it's very prevalent, and so teaching students at a younger age will help prevent some of those violent relationships later on.
And give us some of those tips. Give us some of those tips. And for someone that's watching out there that are not able to be into one of your, your educational classrooms, about some things that they really need to look for.
Well, there are some common warning signs in relationships. Every relationship is unique, of course, but there are some things that are healthy and unhealthy in all relationships. And so if you're in a relationship where somebody's constantly putting you down or constantly trying to control your decisions, where you go or what you want to do, that's not healthy and in a normal relationship. But we teach a lot of our students and adults that I talk to that to kind of look out for your friends if they start changing plans a lot, very common, with no real good reason. That could be a warning sign. If they start kind of just completely changing how their friendship looks with you, that could be a warning sign. Abnormal scarves and sunglasses and long sleeves when the weather's not really appropriate for that.
To cover different things.
Right, to cover different things, some of the physical or just hiding the way that they're holding their emotions. And so those are just some abnormal changes, and if that relationship has been a change recently, then you may could kind of figure out that something may be going on there.
Well, you know how social media is now.
Yes.
How does that come into play in when you're actually speaking to these groups? Because, you see all of these, a lot of kids like to take these selfies,
Yes.
And they're so image and body conscious, and their esteem is, based on how many likes they get from a particular picture. And so how does that come into play with what you deal with the teens and with the kids?
Well, talking with the youth specifically, it's very important to talk with them about social media and explain that an abuser can control you, because that's what domestic violence or dating violence relationship is about, is one person getting control. So that sometimes they do that through social media and through Facebook and text messages and all these new ways of communication. And it's important to teach the students that that's not okay either. And just because it's not physical or verbal abuse, it's still happening through social media in different ways, and to teach them what are appropriate boundaries with social media and what you can expect.
And that's so important in every relationship, about setting those boundaries.
Right, absolutely. That's probably the biggest thing that we teach, is having boundaries, and to know when somebody is constantly trying to get you to cross those boundaries and where you're comfortable in a relationship, because at no point should that be an issue.
Absolutely. So aside from going to the schools, what other things have you all been doing?
So Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we had our big event called Pumpkins with Pals at the mall, and we decorated pumpkins, basically, and the families came out, and they just spent time together, because that's a big common theme in healthy relationships, is spending time together. And so they decorated pumpkins, and moms and children and fathers and sons. It was great, and we had lots of friends and family. We're speaking at a lot of churches and different groups event. We have church bulletins that we provide to any church that asks, that are just inserts that they can send out through their congregation. And so just lots of presentations and communication.
And that's a whole other issue in itself. When you're talking about religion and in churches, there's so much abuse that goes on within people's families that are considered, churchgoers or Christians, and it's sometimes hush-hush.
Right. Yeah, domestic violence has no specific face. It happens in every religion, every race, every economic class. It has no one identity. It happens, 1 in 3 women is the statistic that they say, and that's every family.
That's huge.
Right. That's very large.
That's huge. And so so you're doing some things that, for this month. And so for a church, if a church wants to have someone from Wings to come out, what would they need to do in order for that to happen?
So to get any kind of brochures
Yeah.
or presentations or anything from Wings, all you have to do is just call the 478-272-8000 number and just simply tell them what you're interested in, and they'll get
Yeah.
you connected with myself or somebody else to provide you with that information.
Very good. And so there's a lot of community effort that's going into to really talk about domestic violence. And we're so glad that you all are doing what you're doing. And you know, when I first came in here to see this display, if you have not seen this, when I talk about it so profound, is seeing that these shoes represent people who lost their lives. And I'm looking on there and I'm like, these are people's family members.
Absolutely. The youngest
These
we
are-
had was 6 months, and the oldest is 86.
That's what
and
she
those
was
are
saying.
people's kids and grandparents and brothers and sisters, and it's kind of unreal.
It is so unreal, and so much has changed through the years, too, to have programs like Wings. You know, when I talk about my Aunt Irene, I mean, that was 40 years ago.
Right.
And they did not have access to, you know, to certain services back then.
Right.
You know, and my family kind of just had to deal with it, so to speak.
On
Is
their
that
own.
on your
Right.
own?
Yeah, and Wings offers support groups for anybody who's been dealing with domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And we have lots of different services that we're grateful to be able to provide because, I mean, it happens so commonly, as we were saying just a second ago.
It does. And now we're not silent about it.
Right, absolutely. We're able to speak out
Yeah.
and to have displays and have events, and, you know, people are really supporting to promote healthy relationships. which is
Absolutely.
amazing.
Absolutely. Because we don't want to be victims.
No, nobody did.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charlotte.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've had a good time.
Wonderful. This is Charlotte, everyone. And we're back, everyone. We're talking about domestic violence. We're talking about how it does not just affect the family member itself, but it affects the whole family. And we've got Mr. Will Palmer here as a licensed professional counselor with Community Mental Health with us. How are you, sir?
Good, and you?
Doing very well.
Wonderful.
Now, we want to introduce you to the community because from my understanding, you're pretty new here.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Will Palmer. I have a background in mental health counseling. Did my graduate work at Palm Beach Atlantic College back in the olden days.
Yeah.
And been working with at-risk youth and families for a number of years in various settings, including DJJ residential facilities. Eastman YDC was one of the facilities that I actually did some work in. Worked in homes and mental health centers, and worked with DFACS and foster care agencies, and done a lot of work with at-risk children and adolescents in just about every setting.
About every setting. And now you're here.
Yes, yes.
You were transplanted Dublinite.
Yes, I'm here. I'm a native Floridian, and I'm here to see if I can make a difference in this particular area.
All right. Well, we're glad to have you here. All right. Now, let's talk about what you do at Community Mental Health. And we want to kind of segue into how domestic violence affects youth.
Okay. Well, I am a therapist in the Child and Adolescent Department at Middle Georgia Community Service Board.
Right.
I work with children, teenagers, as well as their families to address various emotional and psychological issues.
And so working in that area, you fully understand the dynamics of when someone is being abused in the home and how that can affect kids.
Absolutely. Each year, it's estimated that 3.3 million children witness domestic violence. And that's a staggering statistic. And unfortunately, 80 to 90% of the time that domestic violence takes place, a child is present.
Yeah.
And it's estimated that at a 30 to 60% rate, you have co-occurring incidents where not only the domestic violence incident is taking place, but the child is actually involved in the process where child abuse is taking place. So,
You said 80 to 90% of the kids witness it.
right.
The story about my aunt, Irene, that was something well known back 40 years ago. She was killed on City Hall steps. But, her kids were in the car. She had 8 children. She died at 35 years of age. And so, but, she had 3 of her kids sitting in that car.
Absolutely.
And witnessed the death of their mom.
Absolutely.
How would you say that affected them? I mean, of course, they're in their 40s and 50s now, but, I mean, what can that do to a child?
Well, the effects are far-reaching. There's a lot of issues that come about: emotional effects, physical, psychological. Children develop developmental delays. They suffer academic deficiencies.
Right.
As a result, depression, anxiety, quite prevalent among children who witness domestic violence. A lot of issues with separation anxiety among the younger children. Failure to attach among infants. As they grow older, a lot of the adolescents begin to feel the need to protect their mother.
Right.
So they put themselves in harm's way, and oftentimes they're hurt in the process. You get a lot of issues regarding suicidal behavior,
Right.
gang involvement, because the voids are there, and the boys are looking for someone to fill it.
Wow.
And the gangs are the ones who fill it for that time for a lot of our young men. I mean, there are far-reaching effects. It's just 10, 15 minutes wouldn't
Even
justice.
suffice what you could do.
Absolutely.
And even like my older sister, she was a victim of domestic violence for many, many years, and the kids witnessed so much.
Exactly. But one of the biggest issues that children face who are living within these situations is that they live in fear all the time.
Right. Wow.
I mean, when the car pulls up, you
get tense. They
exactly,
get tense,
because
have to
they
make
don't
sure
know
everything's
what's going to trigger the behavior. When dad comes in or the boyfriend comes in,
Right.
I mean, anything can trigger the behavior. And so they're sitting on pins and needles, all day, all night, just waiting to see what's going to happen. And that is no way for a child to live.
It isn't, yeah. And so we talked about earlier about abuse when it's not physical. Talk to us about some things with kids when they may see a parent being abused that's not physically, and how that trickles down to some issues with the kids.
Well, it's similar to them experiencing child abuse themselves, even hearing the threats that are being made. About 75% of the time, they witness it visually.
Right.
About 20 to 25% of the time, they hear it.
Right.
So whether they're witnessing it visually or hearing it, they still are tremendously impacted by the abuse itself. One of the other issues is the observation of the aftermath. When they witness the bruises, the cuts, the scars, the tears, the broken furniture, all of those things are very impacting. And the severity of the bruise, of the violence, as well as the frequency, plays a tremendous role in how it affects the children.
And what do you do as a therapist? What kind of things do you work on with the kids to kind of help them process some of these emotions and different issues?
Well, one of the primary issues with counseling kids who have experienced these sort of things is helping them to develop trust within adults.
Wow.
Because they've lost that in many cases. So you see a lot of young people who are totally disrespectful toward adults.
Right.
Because they have learned early on that adults cannot be trusted. So you have to establish that. Establishing a good rapport with them and letting them know that someone really cares and that they're heard, and allowing them the opportunity to express themselves, using play therapy and art therapy, music therapy, and all these other genres of therapy to actually engage them. And I just think that it's important to deal with the individual child and see what makes them comfortable. Make sure you ask them what makes them comfortable versus
Right.
what makes them uncomfortable as it relates to interacting with adults, and just building that relationship and letting them know that they matter to someone.
And I spoke with my cousin about witnessing his mom being murdered. He was 9, the oldest. He was 9 years old, and he said, we probably needed therapy.
Right.
He said, but we couldn't afford, to go to therapy to get counseling, and he said, so we just dealt with it.
Right.
And another one who was 7 sat in the front seat. He said that every day he wakes up, he still remembers.
Right.
He thinks about seeing his dad kill his mom.
Absolutely.
And he lost his daughter. She was 20 years old. And he said that triggered what happened with him when he was little with his mom.
Absolutely. PTSD is very prominent among those who have witnessed domestic violence, and the regression of things like bedwetting becomes an issue.
Right.
There are a lot of issues that nightmares is another recurring issue with those
Right.
who witness severe domestic violence. So it's really interesting in that even a lot of the ADHD symptoms are oftentimes linked to domestic violence, and
Right.
the two prominent diagnoses that I've seen during the years that I've been working in mental health as it relates to children and adolescents are ADHD and
Right.
ODD, oppositional defiant disorder. And it's amazing that there's such a correlation
Right.
between those particular diagnoses and domestic violence. Although we know association or correlation does not equal causation,
Right.
but it's interesting in itself to know that there's such close correlations there.
And so what can we do as individuals? Because, things have happened in families, as parents that or as educators who may be working with kids who they see certain patterns of behavior. What do you suggest as a therapist that we do to try to help? Does that make any?
Recommend counseling, especially if you see issues such as isolation, signs of depression, withdrawal.
Right.
Those kinds of things. Acting out is another predominant issue with kids who suffer domestic violence. Hard to get them under control. I've often said that if you see a child with severe behavior problems, oftentimes it points back to something going wrong in the home.
Wow.
That is a tough one to deal with, because when counseling with families and trying to maintain the family secret,
Right.
which
Right.
adolescents are famous for doing, it becomes a little tough even in the diagnostic process, because when the psychologist is doing his psychological assessment or the psychiatrist is doing his psychiatric evaluation, he can only go by the information given.
Right.
And oftentimes that information is left out. So there are a lot of kids who are suffering from PTSD who aren't being properly diagnosed as a result.
Wow.
And even during counseling, I do an exercise called a timeline where I take them back to their earliest memories in childhood. And they're going to leave out a lot of things that happen in the house in most cases,
Yeah.
But as they get to know you better and build that rapport, sometimes they begin to tell you about some of those issues, but oftentimes it's left out. So diagnosing the correct things with kids sometimes is a tough thing to do.
And you said that developing the trust
Exactly.
is so important.
Exactly.
Developing trust, because back then it was not talked about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They knew it happened.
Absolutely. And
you didn't
it's
talk
really interesting that those who witness severe domestic violence are at a much higher risk of experiencing child abuse themselves, including sexual abuse. So there's so many stats out there that points to domestic violence as an issue that we've got to do more about.
Right.
Runaway, it's a primary cause for runaway, primary predictor for future delinquency. There are so many negative impacts
Right.
that are involved, and I'll be glad to to share with any organization,
Yes.
churches. I do workshops for youth in terms of motivating youth.
Okay, good.
I'd be glad to do parenting education workshops, which I've actually written a parenting education curriculum based on my experiences working with at-risk children.
Wow.
And of course, these workshops are free of charge to the community. You know, so I just want to do more to help.
Wonderful.
One of my issues is that I have and have always had trouble passing the prison buses and seeing the young men working on the side of the road in prison gangs because they got a bad break in the home. They didn't receive the proper nurturing that they needed. And as a result, they had no one to guide them into adulthood. I know we're big on mentoring, trying to replace the father, but I'm an advocate for fathers taking their proper place and being fathers.
Absolutely.
And good fathers, not the kind who actually abuse their wives or girlfriends or their children.
Absolutely. Well, we certainly appreciate having you on and the plethora of knowledge that you have concerning this and the passion you have. Wonderful having you here.
Thank you.
Well, you know, it's been great having our guests today talking about domestic violence, just different issues that we all know something about a little bit. And it's a very serious subject. So this month being Domestic Violence Month, we are hoping that you are being made aware of the different signs of abuse, okay? That's all the time we have for Real Talk, and we thank you for watching, and please, please keep watching.